outside of networking, the best practice sharing, I think the most important thing that we have is what we're going to be talking about in this session, and that's our benchmarking study and what we do. So those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's something that we do like every 2 years. It's a benchmarking study where we work with Jonathan Taylor and his organization, and people kind of submit anonymously sales data for the year, and then we can compare ourselves to the NACS organization, how tribes are doing, like year over year, and how we're doing over regular convenience stores, and then we use it as benchmarks to compare ourselves to each other to make sure that we're, everyone's doing well. So if you think you're struggling, this is a great opportunity to kind of submit your numbers and see where you with everyone else in the Indian country that submits. So we have tribes all over the country that submit information, but more the better. And we've always reached out to a lot of tribes and trying to get as much, I want to say, buy-in as we can to get it done, because the more numbers we get, the better it looks. And the numbers that come back whenever we do these studies are tremendous. So it just makes me think, if we had all the members that were able to kind of like see what Indian country does, you guys would be very impressed. And then it would also help you make be like a better, I would say like almost a better operator. Like there's a lot of ways to use it. And that's kind of what our panel is here. We have Jonathan, he can talk about it a little bit. And then we have a group up here that is going to speak on how they use it and what it's good for and how it works for them. But I will turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Tony. My name is Jonathan Taylor, and it's my pleasure to be invited back here. Thank you to the tribe, Suquamish, for hosting this, and for all of you for the opportunity to speak to you about the tribal benchmarking data book. I have some slides. I'm going to try and go through them pretty quickly. What I'm about to show you is all material that has been approved for public sharing. These data books are printed, one for each store, and given to the tribes that participate, and only they have access to the data. And then there are a couple of indexes, a couple of statistics that every year we get approval to make public, and I'll be showing you some of those so you get a feel for the data book. I think the main thing here is to persuade you of its value to you, and then persuade you of our protection of your confidential and proprietary corporate information. First slide, please. All right, great. So we've been doing this for a little while now, and we've had some pretty healthy numbers of stores. You can see they bounce around. In 2020, we had Oneida, and they brought a lot of stores into the sample. But generally, we're fairly satisfied that having 30 or 35 stores is good for reliability, and we'd love to have more. This was originally the project of TCSA when it was called the Summit Group, to design something that was tribe specific, an answer to the NACS that was tribe specific and independent of the NACS data book. Ever since then, TCSA has participated in the refinement of the work. On the right, you can see that's the cover page from just a sample Quinault Q-Mart 2. Quinault has several stores. This is the cover for their data book for one of those stores, and it shows the group data, but then it shows the individual store data. So how does this work operationally? In the next few months, we're going to be working with a task force of members of the board who are going to review the data book from last edition, 2022, and the questionnaire from last edition, which is a multi-tab Excel spreadsheet, and see if we want to do some new questions or reform the survey in some way. Then TCSA will distribute the blank Excel spreadsheet to all of its members. And the members will be encouraged to participate in the survey and send the data directly to me. We can do that with an encrypted Excel spreadsheet. We can do that with a private Dropbox link. We can work it out by CD-ROM in a FedEx if you'd like to do that. But the data come to me, not to TCSA. And then we work with the data to produce masked information where the data all goes into an average and or a median or a max and a min, or into a picture of a distribution. But no individual store information is revealed to the group. But you can see on the data book, in a way I'll show you in a second, your own data. And then once the data books are done, there'll be a process where we gather the participating stores, and I present sort of trends in the data, and we go through and answer questions. But it's only the participating stores that get access to the data book and copies relevant to their stores. With one minor exception, the executive director of TCSA gets a generic copy with no individual stores information. We work with two-factor authentication on our software team using Dropbox, and we're happy to sign non-disclosure agreements with each tribe if that's an additional layer of protection. Obviously, our engagement letter with TCSA has a clause relating to confidentiality. When we meet as the participating tribes, I will bring a draft set of statistics that would be eligible for sharing publicly in a flyer. And the flyer is a one-page document that goes out and helps get people enthusiastic about TCSA and the data book in the future. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So let me jump right into it. What's of interest is the place of a store among its peers. And so you all have seen in statistics textbooks and things, the bell curve. That's a well-behaved, large numbers of sampled observations. That black vertical line in the middle is the average in a well-balanced distribution. The average and the median are very close together. But you can see if I had an average store size up in the upper graph of 4,187 square feet, in a normal distribution, there'd be a negative number way over there if we measured our standard deviation and so on. And you know, stores can't have negative square footage. That's science fiction, right? What's true is in the lower graph. This world is much more messy. It doesn't behave in those nice bell distributions. And those little bars represent the actual TCSA participating tribes' square footages from very small, 300, to very, very large, 1,200 square feet. And this little whisker plot, it's called a box and whisker plot, describes the distribution. The dot in the middle is the median, and the heavy rectangle, the black rectangle, is the middle half of the distribution. So in a very quick way, we can summarize how the statistics of the stores participating are distributed. So this kind of unpacks what a row in the data book looks like. Each row will have a statistic. It'll have the TCSA store average from the previous edition of the data book, the TCSA store average for the current one, the own store value, the units, the column there, TCSA as a percentage of the NACS value in 2021. We're comparing it to the national statistics. The N is the number of stores. And if we have more than 15 stores, we'll plot a box and whisker plot on the right. And that red diamond indicates where that store's number fits in the distribution. So this is a way of presenting a lot of information all at once. And here is the collection of statistics that the participants approved for the flyer last year. And these diamonds represent a random collection of stores. They're not all from one store. But you can see we're gathering stores per firm, store size, motor fuel pool margin in cents per gallon, fuel gallons, average selling price of fuel, full-time store employees, part-time store employees, percent Indian, percent non-Indian. And you can get a sense very quickly as you go through these tables where you stand against the distribution and the outliers. Those dots are outliers, and the numbers at the left and right of the distribution are the max and the min. So we have several data tables. Some of them run for a couple pages each, covering all of these metrics that are coming out of revenue data, employment data, store attribute data, volume data, units sold, and so on. And these go back to the first executive director of TCSA, looking at the NACS report and deciding what would be useful for tribes. All right. We've also been running with the stores that have appeared multiple years in the data, some same store trend numbers. And we're probably going to have to rethink that a little bit. If people drop out, then our pool of same store stores goes smaller and smaller. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If we get the same tribes, we'll have these. But we have about 16 stores, and we can look, those dark sort of staple-like graphics or the 95% confidence interval. And you can see there's been some pretty good trends in fuel and maybe not such great trends in tobacco. And this is something that we'll examine when we see exactly who are the participating tribes when we get the data. In 2022, you can see we had 12 tribes, 35 different stores. It was kind of neat that we had a Pueblo convenience store that was owned by a consortium of 19 Pueblos. On the map, you can see New Mexico in the U.S. map at the bottom. That store was outside Albuquerque. We also had the Redding Rancheria. It has changed from time to time. As I mentioned, Oneida participated in 2020. They didn't participate in this time period. We'd be excited to have more tribes from more states participating this year. From what I understand from you all, this data book helps executives in the C-store think about talking to owners and thinking about talking to store managers. You can tune your operations with these comparisons, and you can also demonstrate your operations to your tribal boards of directors and elected officials. This is our draft calendar for the timetable of the next edition. We're going to be in conversation in the next few weeks about the survey instrument from last time and what we want to do. I would like to get to December 31st without any question about what we're going to do to modify the survey. And then we'll issue the survey in late January. The idea being we don't want to crowd your financial people as they're closing out the year, but we do want to get them as soon as the statistics for 2024 are together. And then, as you can see, in April, we're going to circulate the drafts. This was a recommendation from the last edition. Circulate the drafts to everybody for them to review the data. Here's a challenge between you all and the outside consulting firm. If you mistype something and it's missing a zero or it's got too many zeros, I can probably detect that. But if you put in a 4 and you meant to put in an 8, I can't vouch, I can't determine that there's been a problem. And so this would give us a time for everybody to go through their data books and say, gosh, this is not squaring with our experience. And that improves the sample for everybody. And of course, if we correct an error in a statistic, that'll appear in the distribution of statistics and make the data book more valuable. So that'll be done just the way we treat the main data books. We'll be giving password protected PDFs back to the people who provided us the data. And then the plan is to have all the electronic versions prepared by your May meeting and hard copy versions as soon after that as possible. Those would be sent out to each store. So with that, I've kind of laid out what the data book is. We're going to now hear from some folks who have been using the data book, and then we'll have some time for questions before lunch.
Hello, my name's Anthony Enzler with Quinault Enterprises, and I was going to give a talk about and bring up some points on what we use the data book for, but then I saw Ernie's presentation just now, and I'm going to change it a little bit. We're all wearing gray pants up here. I have 8 belts in my drawer. They're all brown and black. Ernie's side of the house is the creative side of the house, right? We could clearly see that when he was up here. He's high I, high energy. We're probably the other side of the house, the high C's. I live in data. I love data. I'm the 50-year-old doing regression analysis on his fantasy football team in the basement. That's the type of data I need. So I do want to point out that you got to have both to make a really good team. So the data book will give you kind of what we talked about in Ernie's presentation about getting to that granular level of data you need to really create the marketing that we're all trying to get to too. So we all make decisions. The creative side doesn't make decisions with data, couldn't find a balanced budget if they tripped over it. The controlling side on our side, we won't make a decision without more data. And so that's really what this is we need both sides to actually have a fully functioning business. So we use the data book quite extensively at our stores. It's always nice to see the I-5 corridors where the predominance of the data is coming from, right? So a lot of those bigger stores with 24 pump handles compared to our Aberdeen store with 8 pump handles, for example, it's a little bit skewed. So it would be nice to see more participation, especially in the rural settings. I don't know if it's possible, but if we had enough participation, I'd like to see maybe a breakout of rural compared to I-5 corridor. I-5 corridor is completely different. I don't send in information for 2 of my stores because it's so rural. I mean, Queets Trading Post is a very seasonal store that generates predominant revenue 4 months out of the year when the state parks are open. So if we could get more, again, my C is coming out and I apologize. If I could get more data, it would really be helpful. And it would help me market. So if we could get more participation and make this dot map all over the state and all over several states, it will really help us out a lot more so that the data is more readily available to share with our creative side of the team so that we can make better marketing. I really also like to see, as we talked about, the red triangles or the red diamonds. It's really nice to see sometimes one of your stores way out on the far end of being very efficient or productive and sharing that with your manager saying, hey, you know, your sales per square foot is better than the Flying J and on some of those types of things. It's really nice to point those out. So we use it as motivators too. And it's really nice to see where we're lacking as well. Maybe FTE per sales. There's a lot of information in here that you can look to find efficiencies from an operating standpoint. That's kind of a red flag. Maybe we should look at that. It's called peer comparison, and the accounting term is peer comparison. You take your common size statements, and I'm sure we all common size our statements and compare them to our own internal stores. But then you take your common size statements and compare them to peers, and that's where you find where you might be lacking in efficiencies. So I would highly encourage everybody to participate in it. It's free, right?
It's, well, that would be news to me.
It's free to
something-
members?
It's
Okay.
something that TCSA does out of its own.
Right. Okay. So it's free to members. So if you're a member and you're leaving data on the table, any high Cs on your team are getting really ticked off because you're leaving data on the table. So make sure you take advantage of this opportunity to get the data. So that's all I have. I'm very open to questions, and I'll turn it over to, I think you're next.
Any questions? No. Dang, you're a thorough. So I have some comments here. Pepsi, Coke, Core-Mark, Harbor, you guys are in the room. You guys throw around the Nielsen data term all the time. I'm sure anybody in operations or store managers, you know, they walk in, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. The Nielsen data shows we don't have Nielsen data. We have our data. And the only way that we know the data is working is if we give it to this guy. So, you know, a couple of years ago, we had a kind of like a, I don't want to call it a revamp, but we had some discussions, myself, you, Frank, on how to get the data in the book correctly. So as Ernie alluded to earlier in his presentation, the Energizer Bunny over there in the corner, garbage in, garbage out. So when you fill this stuff out, if you have questions, ask somebody. Like we had an issue with square footage when we first started doing this. Somebody called somebody on the phone and said, hey, who built the store? Okay, R&O Construction or whoever. It's a 13,000 square foot store. Well, they put 13,000 square foot in there and they were basing the sales off of that. Well, that's not the sales floor. The sales floor is completely different. That's where your gondolas are at. That's where your coolers are at. If you don't do that correctly, then as he alluded to earlier, you're going to have a dot, but your dot's going to be on the other side. And you're going to be like, whoa, we really suck, when maybe you don't. So take the time to get the data correctly because, you know, everybody in here is in operations. Everybody in here is in the financial side of the business. We do have some marketing folks in the room. But as he alluded to earlier, we can't make proper decisions about our businesses compared to businesses that are not in our segment, i.e. mom and pop or, you know, the other guys that are not tribal stores. Our data is completely different. It's miles away. We just commissioned, was it Calibrate, Tony? Company called Calibrate. We're doing a financial feasibility on a property that we have that we want to develop. When they set their data set over, we were shocked. We were like, these are the numbers we look at. So we had to spend time with them. They flew out and Tony and I spent, 2 hours with them and explained our business. I even pulled out some P&Ls and said, hey, this is not a C-store. This is a tribal C-store. This is completely different. And he was shocked. And this guy flies around the country, 50 weeks out of the year? I mean, he was our third stop and it was like Tuesday. So the data is very important. I guess my point here is if you want to know how you're doing, don't know how you're doing against somebody who's not even in your world. Know how you're doing against us. We all talk on the phone all the time, but you know, the CFOs of the world that work for us, we don't talk to them unless something's wrong. You know, if we can give them the correct data out of the gate, that makes it easier for us in operations to try to build something new or to push something in a new direction. Again, the data is super duper important. Garbage in, garbage out. So if you have questions about filling out this survey, reach out to the committee, you know, Tony, myself, or anybody, you know, Frank. We want to make sure that you guys understand this is not like some kind of like Spygate thing. We're trying to make everybody better. And everybody else does it. That's why NACS does it. There's a reason NACS has their study because everybody wants to know how everybody else is doing, you know, and you know, Jonathan alluded to the tobacco line. We all know that it's going away, but if we all don't report it correctly, we may not know how fast it's going away, which is huge. It's important. And it doesn't allow us to pivot quick enough into another business line. You know, if you don't evolve and adapt to the conditions rapidly, you're going to fall off. And then you're going to find yourself, well, did I close this store or what did I do wrong? So again, try to get the data in. It's confidential. You know, we've been doing it for a long time. You can look at it, and if you know your competitors, like I can always pick out John's store in Snoquamish, or when Puyallup puts the data in, I know who they are just by looking at it. But it doesn't say that. You know, if you don't know your competition, you're really not going to know. But again, it's important, guys. So please, if you really want to know what's going on in your area, I highly advise you guys use it. Okay.
Excellent. And one more, it's never about, I don't feel it's about an us or other stations. We in Grays Harbor, I want them to go back to Puyallup and buy from tribal gasoline stations. I want them to go back to King County, or we're all in this together. I want branded tribal C stores to be, when they come out to the ocean shores, they stop by us because we're a tribal branded C store. When they're back in King County, they buy from tribal branded C stores, because we really are all in this together. And we do have a branding, like Ernie was talking about. We do have a branding that is unlike any other C stores out there. And we can work together and actually create a huge market penetration, I feel.
Oh, you have your own. So there's been a lot of talk about individualized data and how you can store data to better your businesses.
Maybe.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Okay. So there's been a lot of talk about how your individual tribes can utilize your individual data to better improve upon how you operate your businesses. I want to talk today kind of about what this data can be utilized for the betterment of this group. And so that would be in the terms of a buyer's group and collective bargaining. And so with this data, I guess we'll start off by explaining, I guess, what a buyer's group is. So buyer's groups are usually coalitions, purchasers that, is it on?
Here, use this game. Use this one.
Yeah, this one's like set up.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So, a buyer's group is a coalition of purchasers that usually band together with a common interest. They usually are in the same industries. They're usually doing the same things, purchasing the same items, and they collaborate together to negotiate pricing and to get better deals on what it is that they're doing. How many in here use Coca-Cola? Pepsi? So it's a pretty common theme that all of us utilize the same vendors, the same products inside of a lot of our stores. And so what I want to use the data for, what I want to start utilizing TCSA for in the collection of your guys' sales data, is to start creating collective bargaining with our manufacturers. I'm sure that through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, we've all kind of gotten exhausted dealing with our vendors. It's been kind of an ongoing thing. They're salesmen, so they're constantly trying to sell us more things, and we're still trying to figure out exactly how we're coming out of this pandemic. I think now more than ever, it's imperative that we as a group of tribes start to come together and use our collective data, mainly our purchasing power, to start forcing these manufacturers to look at us in a different light. I don't know how many of you guys shopped at Costco during the pandemic, like went inside of Costco. Costco was very rarely out of anything. They didn't have too many opportunities or too many times where you would walk into the store and they were out of toilet paper or they were out of hand sanitizer or whatever it may be. The reason why that is because Costco is a massive conglomerate. When those manufacturers saw this pandemic happening, they went through their list of everybody that they deal with and they said, who is going to be able to distribute this the fastest and the most effectively for us during this period of times? And guess what? Our independent distributors were not included in that list. I want to create TCSA and I want to start driving the data with TCSA so that we can show these manufacturers how much money we actually represent in this room. As an individual store, we may not be the biggest thing in the world. Not all of us are Puyallup. Not all of us are Nisqually. Some of us only have one store. Some of us only have one store that's 500 square feet. But there's no reason why you as a tribe involved in TCSA should not be receiving the same pricing and the same benefits as every other tribe in this room. And the only way for us to do that is to collect our data together, get a number down, and start forcing the manufacturer's hands. So that's why I'm pleading with you and making the push to this group and to this room that it's really important that we get this benchmarking study done. I know it's time consuming. I know that it kind of is a pain to have to scramble and set aside time to go through all of your data to get this information, but it's important. It's important for this purpose because with this data, we can now start going back to our manufacturers instead of our individual vendors in our areas and saying, this is what we want. And we represent this a dollar amount and you are going to listen to us. So that's the ultimate goal of TCSA, is to create a power stream for you guys and a management stream for you guys that we can start forcing the hands of manufacturers. Not to say that we don't love our vendors. I mean, I'm sure we all have great relationships with our vendors, but their hands are tied just like ours. They're a middleman. They make money off of the products that they're selling. They don't make Reese's peanut butter cups. They don't make candy Snickers bars. There's somebody that they're purchasing that from, and they ultimately have to make money off of that purchase. So if we can start to go around them and go directly to these manufacturers and say, this is the pricing that we want for our groups, I think it will be tremendously beneficial for everybody in this room. We all experienced it during the pandemic. It was a nightmare. We were out of stock. We were struggling to find places to get products from. We were exploring new vendors. We were doing everything we could. And quite frankly, in a lot of our areas, we were the only ones open. So to be put at such a tremendous disadvantage when we were the only ones that were actively out there trying to keep this country going, it just opened my eyes to the idea that we dropped the ball on that one, and we should be coming together as a team and looking at this as a collective unit. There's definitely challenges to buyers groups. I mean, the coordinating of issues is always a task because there's so many tribes involved. Trust and transparency. It's ingrained in us as tribes. It's something that has been it's a historical problem for us. The sharing of data and the releasing of information has always been used against us. That is just how the data has been used, no matter what it was, whether it was our tribal member enrollment numbers, whether it was our economic development at our casinos and what the casinos were doing. That information has always been taken from us and used against us. Now it's time for us to take our information back and use that information to make us the standard of this industry that we are. So, thank you.
It really doesn't take that long to put the data together, especially if you just assign it to your controller.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. AI is the wave of our future in our industry. If you guys get a chance to go play with ChatGPT or any of the other AI programs today, I suggest you do so. It for me and my job and what it is that I do on a daily basis, it is saving me tremendous amount of time going through and analyzing data. It has a plethora of information out there. As long as you go back and verify the information that it's giving you, you can't lose. It's a fantastic. We're living in the wave of the future right now. Oh, camera.
He's gonna walk around with the mic. Okay, also, can we make that slide deck available? Are we gonna make that to the group? Okay. I put a slide deck together, but we're a little pressed for time. So there is a slide deck on the importance of data and how we need to use it.
So that's your way of saying, make my question quick.
No, man.
So Sandwich
Hungry,
has not
Cameron.
participated in this. Our store's only 2.5 years old. Are you looking for aggregated financial information that comes from my CFO? Or are you talking about point of sale, back of the house SSCS? Okay, that's
Yep.
all right.
Yeah, data.
So that's not something that's going to go to my controller. That's going to come from the store management team.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Was there another question over there? Another hand up? I would just, it's Isaiah, right?
Yes.
I would just underscore his last point in red. This is an exercise of tribal data sovereignty. I wear some different hats, including with the University of Arizona. And in Arizona, a lot of individual Indian healthcare data was used and abused horribly. And data sovereignty is a critical issue. This is the use of tribal data by tribes for tribal purposes, for tribal agendas. And I can't say how heartened I was to hear your remarks, Isaiah. Thanks.
That's it. Okay, cool. We're done.
Thank you, guys.
All right. I just have one last thing to add. Just on this survey too, there's a lot of employment data on there. So your HR department does have to work with it. But if you guys are struggling with anything employment wise, like there's a lot of averages, wages, different things operationally that go into that too. And it's something like if you find yourself in a place where you're struggling or you could be thriving, and you can see that in the data. So there is a lot, not just sales, there's operational stuff and HR stuff, and we find that really valuable. Yeah, but I want to thank everyone for speaking. I appreciate it. And then after we do this, we can head to lunch until 1:15.
Thank you. Got the big word about Thank you. Thank you so much.
I know. I got color now. I don't have gray. Ernie, look. It's not great, bro. I don't have it. I still have an Android. I still have an Android though. But you got an iPhone for me, right?
He's got an Android. We'll take it.